Today was the second day of what can only be described as an utterly absurd scandal in the Trump administration. Doggate. Yes, Doggate. Yesterday, the president held an event outside the White House featuring Conan, the combat dog who assisted in the raid that killed ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. The president referred to the dog using the pronoun he and him, so everyone assumed the dog was male. But then shortly afterward, the White House sent a correction to the press pool saying that the dog was actually, in fact, female. After that made the rounds, the White House then corrected itself to say that the dog was male. So the story went around on Twitter and everyone moved on. But then again, it happened again today. The Department of Defense told ABC News that the dog was a girl before reversing itself later in the day to say that the dog was actually a boy. So now this all might seem trivial, and maybe this just was a result of a comedy of errors taking place somewhere behind the scenes. But the frustrating thing is that we may never actually know the answer to something so simple as the biological sex of a dog, because this White House has made a habit of lying to the American public, especially when the president makes mistakes or thinks the truth reflects poorly on him. Recall the infamous Sharpie Gate, when the president created an interagency panic among U.S. emergency preparedness officials because he couldn't admit that he had been wrong about the path of a hurricane. Or after Hurricane Maria, when the president refused to accept that thousands of Americans had died in Puerto Rico because it happened on his watch. In fact, the very first White House press conference, you remember this, the first one ever held by this administration, was convened to promote the lie that President Trump's inauguration crowd had been the biggest in history. When we come back, I'm going to ask two former White House officials what it means when you can't trust anything the White House says, even when it's something as small and trivial.
I was told about the breed. I was told about Conan himself, and you're very lucky he's not in a bad mood today, Jeff.
Oh, really?
Not in a bad mood. You're safe. So they're incredible animals, and thank you all very much.
Would you say he's a very good boy?
Turns out the question is harder to answer than you think. Ben Rhodes and Near Tandon are back with me. Guys, this is not about the sex of a dog. It's larger than that. This White House has a credibility problem with everything they say. The president visited Walter Reed the other day for an unexpected and unannounced health checkup, and we still don't know the answer to why he was there. Was it because he just wanted to get his physical done early, or was it something else? And we don't know that answer because the White House has been consistently misrepresenting or lying about things since almost day one of this presidency, Ben.
Yeah, and look, Katie, we can laugh about this, but the thing that is so serious about this is, look, I was in the White House, and a big part of what you have to do sometimes is, in a crisis, you have to give information, life and death information that people can trust. When there was an Ebola epidemic, information about how you can contract Ebola. I remember feeling the weight of that pressure. If there's an economic downturn, information that can move global markets. Hurricane, big weather events that put people at risk. And the problem is, knock wood, Katie, we haven't had a really big crisis, at least not that isn't one of this administration's own making, since Trump took office. What happens if there's a recession? What happens if there's an epidemic? What happens if there's a crisis where people need to trust the information that they get from their government? And I think this is a really big problem, that you can't even trust something as basic as what the crowd size was at inauguration or what the sex of a dog is.
Nira, so what happens?
I mean, I have to say, am I the only person worried that both the Pentagon and White House, two entities that are responsible for our safety in war and pretty weighty issues, cannot determine accurately the sex of a dog after 48 hours? I mean, it does strike me as really bizarre, kind of humorous, but also kind of insane. I mean, I agree with Ben 100% that it tells us that we can't rely on the White House for anything we have to deal with. I think we've sort of known that for almost 3 years now, starting with the crowd size, but going to the facts of almost every incident that's happened where there's some issue of credibility. You have the president who says something, and then the White House and now the agencies and every apparatus of government tries to make what he said true.
Well, we're seeing it with the Republican Party right now on impeachment and Ukraine attacking our elections. That's a very big example of seemingly scrambling to justify something the president said.
I mean, Mike Pompeo today is essentially, as Ben pointed out earlier, is essentially really just trying to rationalize or really defend Donald Trump's gaslighting of America. I mean, that is what happens regularly. And I think there used to be people in the administration who'd stop this, and they've all been fired. So we are now left with lie compounded by another lie compounded by another lie. I mean, we still don't really know what happened with the Secretary of the Navy. Was he really fired? Was he trying to get a good word in? I mean, we just don't have accurate information about most things happening in our government. And I think that creates a lot of distrust, but also anxiety, particularly if there is a crisis.
It's not even just that. It's when the president is asked about something he said on camera, Ben, he himself will say, I never said that, even though we have him on camera saying that exact thing.
Yeah, I mean, Katy, what we've witnessed, and you've covered these guys for a long time, but is a real debasement of the expectations that we have in public officials. It's both the fact that they think that accountability doesn't apply to them. Also, they don't even feel the need to be accountable in the way that past administrations were. There's a White House press secretary who's been there for a long time who's never done a White House press briefing where you would be challenged on those lies. They don't even feel the need to answer for these things anymore. And it's actually kind of reminiscent of what you see in authoritarian systems where the truth is whatever the leader says. There's no such thing as objective reality, And again, we can chuckle at it, but the question is, can Americans trust this office that is the most powerful office in the world? And can there be norms of accountability, that if you say something wrong, it has to be corrected? Or if you say something wrong, the White House press secretary has to stand up in front of a room full of reporters and answer for that. And they seem to have changed the law of gravity as it applies in our politics, that those types of standards of accountability don't apply to them. And that does tie into impeachment, because impeachment is saying, no, if you get caught doing something that is an impeachable offense, which clearly happened in this case, we have to have checks and balances in our system. And if the Republican Party essentially says that they will not go along with holding this administration accountable, then we are in kind of a post-objective reality, post-truth form of